Close your eyes now, my sweet friend. Just let your head sink a little deeper into the pillow. Feel the soft weight of the blanket hugging your shoulders like the gentlest arms in the world. Outside, the rain is falling so softly against the window, tiny silver taps that want nothing more than to wash every worry away. Breathe in slowly with me. Hold it for a moment and let it drift out even slower, carrying the day behind it. That's it. Good again. Deeper this time. Tonight I'm going to stay right here beside you, my voice barely louder than the rain, whispering the true story of a man named Chris Gardner, a father whose heart was bigger than every hardship the world could throw at him. This is the story of the Pursuit of Happyness, told just for you, so you can let every scene wrap around you like the warm wool while sleep creeps in on quiet feet. You don't have to hold on to anything tonight. Let my words be the only thing you carry. Feel how the mattress cradles every part of you, how the room is dim and safe, how the air smells faintly of clean linen and faraway lavender. I'm turning the page of an old soft-covered book now. Hear the gentle rustle of thick paper, and the story begins in San Francisco, 1981, when a young father believed that happiness was something you could chase down the same way you chase a bus on a windy morning. His name was Chris, played so beautifully by Will Smith, and his little boy Christopher, played by Will's real son Jaden, only 5 years old, with eyes that held the whole universe. Fun little trivia for you before we truly begin. Will Smith actually lost over 30 pounds for this role, and learned to solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, because the real Chris Gardner could do it, just to make every tiny detail feel alive. And Jaden, he was so small that between takes he would fall asleep standing up, leaning against his dad's leg exactly like the character would. Isn't that the sweetest thing? Now, have you ever held someone's tiny hand in yours and felt that no matter how heavy the world became, you would carry them through fire just to keep that hand warm? Let that feeling settle in your chest tonight, soft and glowing, as the rain keeps tapping its lullaby. We're going to walk very slowly through every street Chris walked, feel every crack in the sidewalk under his tired shoes, smell the salty bay air mixed with exhaust and hot dogs from street vendors, hear the clatter of cable cars in the distance. I'll describe every texture, every color of the sunset bleeding across those famous hills, every tear that slid down a cheek, every hopeful smile that refused to die. And whenever you feel yourself floating a little too close to sleep, that's perfect. Just let go. I'll still be here whispering when you come back. If a scene makes your heart squeeze, breathe into that squeeze. Let it soften. Let it become part of the blanket of calm wrapping around you tonight. Are you comfortable? Wiggle your toes once if there's any last tension hiding there. Good. Now let them melt. Shoulders dropping, jaw loosening. Even the tiny muscles around your eyes relaxing like petals closing at twilight. Perfect. The rain is getting a little heavier now. A steady, soothing drum that says, "You are safe. You are held. Nothing is required of you, except to listen and drift." One more slow breath with me, in and out. Lovely. Here we go, darling. The first page is turning. The streetlights of 1981 are flickering on one by one, and a father is parking his car with a 5-year-old asleep against his chest, dreaming of basketball courts and dragons that turn into stars. Let's follow them, very softly, into the beginning of everything. The year is 1981, and the light in San Francisco this morning is thin and gray. The kind of light that slips between tall buildings and makes every color look a little tired. Chris Gardner steps out of his small apartment carrying his son Christopher on his hip, the boy's head heavy with sleep against his father's neck. Feel the weight of that little body, warm and trusting, the soft curls brushing Chris's cheek each time the child breathes. Chris is dressed in a neat but worn shirt, tie slightly crooked because he tied it while bouncing Christopher on one knee. In his other arm, he carries a large white machine, a bone density scanner that weighs almost as much as the boy. It looks like a portable X-ray, heavy, expensive, meant to revolutionize doctors, offices. But right now it feels like an anchor made of hope and plastic. He walks down the hill toward the bus stop, shoes scuffing softly against the damp sidewalk, the fog curling around his ankles like a cat that refuses to let him leave. You can smell the ocean mixed with coffee from a corner cafe and the faint metallic scent of the scanner's casing when it warms in the sun. Every few steps, Chris shifts the boy higher, whispering, "I got you, little man. Daddy's got you," so quietly that only Christopher's dreams can hear. Have you ever carried something, or someone, that felt heavier than your own heartbeat, yet you kept walking because stopping wasn't an option? Let that memory surface gently tonight, then let the rain wash it soft. At the hospital, he demonstrates the machine to a tired doctor who barely looks up from his paperwork. Chris's voice is smooth, practiced, full of belief. It gives you twice the detail of a regular X-ray at half the price. Watch his fingers glide over the buttons with the tenderness of a pianist. He believes in this machine the way some people believe in miracles. The doctor nods politely, says he'll think about it, and Chris's smile stays bright even though inside something small cracks. He thanks the doctor, lifts the scanner again, feels the ache bloom across his shoulders like warm water spreading. On the bus ride home, Christopher colors with a broken crayon while Chris stares out the window at people who look like they have places to be and money to get there. Back home, Linda, Christopher's mother, is folding tiny socks with quick, angry movements. The apartment is cramped, the walls thin, the rent 2 months late. You can almost taste the tension in the air, metallic like a storm about to break. She tells Chris the daycare is threatening to kick Christopher out because the check bounced again. Her voice is low so the boy won't hear, but it trembles at the edges. Chris tries to explain that the scanners will sell, just one big sale and everything changes, but the words feel hollow even to him. That night, while Christopher sleeps curled like a comma between them, Linda whispers that she's leaving for New York. She can't breathe here anymore. Chris lies very still, feeling the mattress dip where her warmth used to be, listening to the foghorn out in the bay moaning like something wounded. Have you ever lain awake counting the spaces where love used to fit, wondering how emptiness can weigh so much? Let that ache come if it needs to, then breathe it out into the dark where the rain is waiting to carry it away. Days turn into weeks. Chris pounds the pavement with the scanner, door to door, hospital to clinic. His shoes wear thin at the soles. You can almost feel the cold sidewalk seeping through. One afternoon, a doctor finally says yes, hands over a check for $800. And Chris runs, all the way to the bank, Christopher trotting to keep up, laughing because Daddy is laughing. The teller counts the money slowly, then looks up with apology in her eyes. The check is no good. The doctor stopped payment. Chris stands there while the world tilts. He thanks her anyway, voice steady for his son's sake, but when they step outside, he has to lean against the brick wall for a moment, feeling the rough texture bite into his palm, grounding him so he won't fall. That night, he tucks Christopher in and tells him the story of the caveman who invented fire after failing 1,000 times. The little boy's eyes are huge. "Did he cry, Daddy?" Chris kisses his forehead. "Only when no one was looking. Money runs out like sand. The landlord changes the locks. Chris carries what they can fit into 2 duffel bags and the bone scanner that no one wants. They sleep on the floor of a friend for a few nights. Then the friend stops answering the door. One evening, Chris stands on a street corner watching the orange streetlights flicker on. Christopher asleep against his chest inside the zipped jacket because the night air is cold. He whispers into the soft hair, "We're just camping, little man, adventure camping." And the lie tastes like copper in his mouth. Have you ever smiled so hard your cheeks hurt because someone smaller than you needed to believe the world was still kind? Hold that smile in your heart tonight. Let it warm the places that feel cold. Then comes the day everything tilts again. Chris parks illegally near a hospital to save bus fare and gets a $25 ticket he can't pay. When he misses court because he's chasing another sale, the police pick him up. He spends the night in jail, still wearing his one good suit because he has an interview the next morning. The cell smells of bleach and old fear. He sits on the metal bench, head in his hands, feeling the coarse fabric of the suit against his forehead, counting heartbeats until morning. In the dark, he talks to God the way a child talks to the nightlight. "Just let me keep him safe. That's all I'm asking." When they release him at dawn, he has exactly 10 minutes to get to the interview. He runs through the streets, tie flapping, shirt stained with jail floor grime, shoes slapping wet pavement. Sweat beads on his forehead and mixes with tears he refuses to let fall. People stare, but he doesn't see them. He sees only the door he has to reach, the chance he has to catch. He arrives breathless, paint flecks in his hair from helping a stranger move the day before. He earned $20 and a promise of future work that never came. The interviewers look at the disheveled man in front of them, at the desperation shining out of his eyes like lighthouse beams. And something in Chris's voice when he speaks, raw, honest, unbreakable, makes them listen. They offer him an unpaid internship at Dean Witter. 6 months, no salary, 1 chance in 20 of being hired at the end. He shakes their hands with both of his, feeling the calluses on his own palms meet their smooth skin, and says yes before they can change their minds. Trivia whisper, the real Chris Gardner once said, that moment felt like someone handed him the entire sky. Walking out into the sunlight with Christopher's tiny hand in his, Chris looks up at the tall glass buildings and feels something shift inside his chest, like a knot finally loosening. He doesn't have a home, doesn't have a dollar, but he has a direction now. And for the first time in months, the air tastes like possibility instead of exhaust. He kneels down, looks his son in the eyes, and says, "We're gonna be okay, little man. Daddy's got a job." Christopher smiles the way only 5-year-olds can, believing because love told him to. The rain outside your window is softening now, turning into the gentlest mist. Feel how heavy your arms have become, how sweetly tired your thoughts are. We're only just beginning, darling. There are so many more streets to walk together, so many more nights when hope feels paper thin and still refuses to tear. Rest now for a moment. Let the story settle into your bones like warm honey. And when you're ready, I'll be right here to walk you into the hardest, most beautiful days of Chris Gardner's life. The internship begins on a Monday morning that smells of fresh coffee and other people's futures. Chris steps into the gleaming lobby of Dean Witter Reynolds with Christopher's tiny hand tucked inside his, the boy's shoes squeaking on the polished marble floor. The security guard looks at the child, then at Chris's tired eyes, and something soft passes across his face. He waves them through without asking questions. Up on the trading floor, the air is electric, thick with ringing phones and shouted numbers and the sharp scent of ink from printers that never stop. Chris is given a desk the size of a postage stamp in the far corner, a phone that feels heavier than the bone scanner ever did, and a stack of cold call lists taller than his son. 20 interns, one paid position at the end. The math is brutal, but Chris smiles anyway because smiling is free. Each morning he drops Christopher at a daycare run by a woman who spells happy with only one P on the sign outside, a place that smells of sour milk and broken crayons. The woman takes the last crumpled dollars from Chris's pocket and sighs. "Don't be late picking him up, Mr. Gardner." He nods, throat tight, and kisses the top of Christopher's head, breathing in the baby shampoo scent that still clings to the curls even though they can't afford baby shampoo anymore. On the bus ride to work, he practices his phone voice in his head, smooth, confident, never desperate, never. Have you ever had to pretend you were someone the world wanted, while every cell in your body screamed that you were running out of time? Let that feeling rise gently, then let the soft rain outside dissolve it. The days become a blur of dialing, smiling, being told no in 100 different polite tones. His fingers develop permanent red grooves from pressing the phone so hard against his ear. He keeps a tally of calls on a scrap of paper. 200 a day, sometimes 300. The other interns wear crisp shirts and talk about college football in summer houses. Chris wears the same shirt 3 days in a row, turning it inside out on the second day so the sweat stains don't show. At lunch, he skips eating so he can make extra calls while the floor is quiet. His stomach growls like a distant train, but hunger is an old friend now. Then the daycare fee goes up. The woman shrugs, helpless. Chris stands in her doorway holding Christopher's backpack shaped like a dinosaur and feels the floor tilt again. He starts racing across the city after work to pick up Christopher before 6, because every minute late costs another $1 he doesn't have. He runs in his one good pair of dress shoes until the soles flap like tired tongues. One evening he's 30 minutes late and the daycare is locked. He bangs on the glass until the woman reopens, angry, and Christopher is sitting alone on the bottom step clutching his dinosaur backpack, eyes red. Chris scoops him up so fast the boy's shoes leave the ground. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," he whispers into the small neck that smells of crayons and fear. That night, they eat saltine crackers and peanut butter from a packet he saved from a client's office. Christopher falls asleep with crumbs on his cheek. Chris sits on the floor beside the mattress they now share in a tiny rooming house and counts the cracks in the ceiling until the numbers blur. The bone scanners still sit in a rented storage unit gathering dust and late fees. He tries to sell one to pay the daycare, but the buyer never shows. The storage company threatens to auction them. Chris stands in the metal hallway between rows of locked doors and feels the walls press in, cold and gray and smelling of old cardboard. He rests his forehead against the cool metal of Unit 116 and talks to the machines inside like they're old friends who betrayed him. "One of you just has to sell," he whispers. "Just one." Have you ever begged an object to save you because asking people stopped working a long time ago? Let that ache bloom softly in your chest, then breathe it out with me. Slow, slower still. Then the IRS freezes his bank account for back taxes. $72 taken in a single afternoon. He stands in the bank lobby staring at the receipt as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. Outside, the sun is shining like nothing happened. That night, he and Christopher sleep in a BART station bathroom because the rooming house locked them out for non-payment. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, harsh and unforgiving. Chris locks the handicap stall and spreads his jacket on the cold tile floor. He sits with his back against the metal wall and pulls Christopher into his lap, wrapping them both in the only blanket they own now. The boy falls asleep almost instantly, thumb in mouth, trusting the way only children can. Chris stays awake, listening to the trains rumble beneath them and the occasional drunk banging on the door. The bathroom smells of bleach and urine and despair so thick he can taste it. He rocks Christopher gently, humming a song his own mother used to hum, feeling the small heartbeat against his chest like a drum telling him to keep going. Morning comes gray and fluorescent. Chris splashes water on both their faces from the sink, combs Christopher's hair with his fingers, straightens the boy's tiny tie that no longer matches anything they own. They walk out into the daylight like any other father and son heading to school and work. No one on the crowded street can tell they just spent the night on a bathroom floor. Chris kisses Christopher goodbye at the daycare gate and whispers, "Be good for Daddy today, okay?" The boy nods solemnly, clutching his dinosaur backpack like armor. Chris watches him disappear inside, then turns and runs for the bus, shoes flapping, heart flapping louder. Back at Dean Witter, the pressure cooker tightens. The interns are ranked weekly by how many accounts they open. Chris is near the bottom because he loses so much time racing across the city. He starts skipping water breaks, bathroom breaks, any break at all. He learns to hang up on rude clients in exactly 1.8 seconds to maximize calls. He memorizes the bus schedule so perfectly he can shave minutes off every trip. One afternoon, he solves a Rubik's Cube in the lobby for a client's bored son. And the father laughs, delighted, and agrees to open an account. Chris's hands shake as he fills out the forms. Trivia whisper: Will Smith practiced that Rubik's Cube for weeks until he could solve it blindfolded, just like the real Chris once did to impress potential investors. Little moments of magic hidden inside the grind. But the nights keep getting darker. Another shelter turns them away because they're over capacity. Chris carries Christopher piggyback through the rain to a church shelter in the Tenderloin. The line stretches around the block, wet and shivering. When they finally reach the front, the woman at the desk looks at the sleeping boy and the exhausted father and stamps their paper with trembling fingers. Inside, the room is filled with rows of metal cots and the low murmur of broken dreams. Chris lays Christopher down on the thin mattress and covers him with both their jackets. He lies beside him fully dressed, shoes still on in case they have to leave quickly. The man on the next cot snores like a dying engine. Somewhere a baby cries and cries. Chris stares at the ceiling and counts heartbeats again. His own, and the smaller, faster one pressed against his side. He thinks, this is the bottom. It has to be. There can't be lower. Have you ever touched what felt like the absolute floor of your life and discovered it was made of something unbreakable underneath? Let that discovery settle warm and quiet inside you tonight. The rain outside your window has become the softest hush now, like someone shushing the whole world just for you. Feel how heavy your eyelids have grown, how sweetly distant the day feels. We're walking through the hardest miles together, darling, but every step is carrying us closer to light. Rest your head a little deeper, let the pillow take all your weight, and when you're ready, I'll still be here, whispering you gently forward into the coldest nights and the warmest dawn Chris Gardner ever knew. The church shelter becomes their fragile rhythm. Every evening after the internship ends at 5 sharp, Chris sprints down the Embarcadero, the cold wind off the bay slicing through his thin suit jacket, shoes slapping wet pavement, tie streaming behind him like a surrender flag that refuses to drop. He reaches the daycare exactly at 6, sometimes 6:02, heart hammering so loud he can barely hear the woman scolding him. Christopher is always waiting on the same plastic chair, legs swinging, dinosaur backpack clutched to his chest like a life vest. Chris kneels, opens his arms, and the boy runs into them so hard they almost fall backward. The hug lasts only 5 seconds, because every second after 6 costs another $1. But in those 5 seconds, the entire universe fits inside 2 heartbeats pressed together. They ride the bus to the shelter, Christopher asleep against his father's chest, the boy's breath warm through the worn shirt fabric. Chris counts the stops by the smell. Fish from the wharf, garlic from North Beach restaurants, exhaust and wet cardboard in the Tenderloin. At the shelter they line up again, rain dripping from their hair onto the cracked linoleum. The woman with the stamp recognizes them now. She doesn't make them wait until the end anymore. She simply nods and hands Chris 2 thin blankets that smell of bleach and other people's nightmares. They find 2 cots side by side when they're lucky, across the room when they're not. Chris lays Christopher down first, removes the boy's tiny shoes one at a time, massaging the small, cold feet between his palms until warmth returns. Then he lies down, fully dressed, jacket over both of them like a tent, and whispers stories about captains who sail across oceans made of stars until Christopher's breathing evens out. One night there are no cots left. The woman shrugs, helpless. Chris thanks her anyway, voice soft so the disappointment won't wake his son. They walk back out into the rain and ride the BART train to the end of the line and back again, all night, because the train is warm and dry and no one asks questions. Christopher sleeps curled on the orange plastic seat, head in his father's lap. Chris sits perfectly still so the boy won't slide, one hand resting lightly on the small back, feeling every rise and fall. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead like a tired heartbeat. At each station the doors open and cold air rushes in, then close again, sealing them back into their moving cocoon. Chris watches the city blur past the windows, neon signs bleeding pink and green across the glass, and thinks, this is what love looks like when it has nowhere left to live. Have you ever loved something so fiercely that even exhaustion felt like a privilege? Let that fierce tenderness settle in your own chest tonight, warm and heavy and safe. Morning always comes too soon. The recorded voice announces Glen Park, the end of the line, and Chris gently wakes Christopher. They splash water on their faces in the station bathroom, share a single toothbrush because the other one was lost weeks ago. Chris combs the boy's hair with his fingers, straightens the tiny collar, and they walk out into the pale dawn like any other commuters. No one on the platform can smell the night on them. At the daycare, Chris kneels again. Be brave today, Captain, he whispers. Christopher salutes with a sticky hand and marches inside. Chris watches until the door closes, then turns and runs for the bus that will take him to Dean Witter, lungs burning, shoes now held together with duct tape on the inside so it doesn't show. At the office, the pressure is a living thing. The managers walk the floor like generals, eyes sharp. One of them, Jay Twistle, played so perfectly by Brian Howe, notices Chris never takes breaks, never drinks coffee with the others, never complains. Jay starts giving him small extra tasks. Deliver this package across town. Pick up my dry cleaning. Anything to test how far hunger can push a man. Chris does every errand with a smile, running through traffic, because every favor is a thread connecting him to the one paid job waiting at the end. He learns to drink water from the cooler in tiny sips so he won't need the bathroom and lose calling time. His lips crack from dehydration. When a client finally says yes, a pension fund manager who likes the sound of Chris's voice, Chris has to grip the desk to stay upright. The commission won't come for weeks, but the word yes tastes like the first drop of rain after a drought. Then the storage unit with the bone scanners sends a final notice. Pay, or everything is auctioned tomorrow. Chris stands in the hallway again, fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry bees, and realizes he has exactly $21 in the world. He spends 14 of them on a single scanner, the last one anyone might ever buy, and carries it on his back across the city to a doctor who once showed mild interest. The doctor is out. Chris waits 3 hours in the lobby, Christopher coloring on the back of brokerage statements with a crayon he found under a chair. When the doctor finally appears, hurried and distracted, Chris gives the sales pitch of his life, voice cracking only once. The doctor writes a check for $250, then pauses. Actually, he says, make it $300. Your kid's cute. Chris has to turn away so the man won't see the tears. He cashes the check immediately, pays the storage fee with minutes to spare, and uses the rest for daycare and one small bag of groceries. Bread, peanut butter, and a single apple that Christopher holds like treasure, all the way home on the bus. That night they have a room again, a tiny one at the Mildred Johnson Residential Hotel, paid for with the doctor's check. It smells of mildew and old carpet, but it has a door that locks and a window that opens 6 inches. Chris gives Christopher the bottom bunk and climbs the ladder to the top, feeling the thin mattress sigh under his weight. For the first time in months, they fall asleep under the same roof that isn't made of fluorescent lights or train ceilings. Chris lies awake listening to his son breathe and thinks, "We made it through another day." Trivia whisper. The real Chris Gardner said that night in the hotel room was the first time in almost a year he allowed himself to cry where Christopher couldn't see. The internship clock is ticking louder now. Only a few weeks left. Chris's numbers climb slowly. He's in the top 5, but not top 2. He starts staying after hours, making calls on his own dime from payphones, voice hoarse, fingers numb from cold. One evening he hangs up after a particularly brutal rejection and realizes he has exactly enough change for one more call or bus fare home, but not both. He stands in the phone booth with the receiver pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone that sounds like a heartbeat giving up, and chooses the call. He walks the 12 miles to the shelter in the dark, arriving long after Christopher has fallen asleep on a cot someone saved for them. He slips in beside the boy, wraps both arms around the small warmth and whispers, I'm here, into hair that smells of daycare, soap, and dreams. Have you ever chosen hope when comfort was only a quarter away? Feel that choice in your own body tonight, the ache in the legs, the burn in the chest, and then feel how softly the rain is washing it clean. The final stretch is merciless. Chris gets food poisoning from a sandwich he found in the office fridge, someone's forgotten lunch, because hunger won. He spends an entire night vomiting in the shelter bathroom, while Christopher sleeps on the floor outside the stall, curled around the dinosaur backpack. The next day, Chris is at his desk by 8, face gray, hands shaking, making 400 calls with a voice like gravel. Another night the shelter is full again, and they sleep on the beach under the pier. The sand cold and damp, waves crashing nearby like slow applause. Chris digs a shallow trench so the wind won't find them, covers them both with their jackets, and tells Christopher stories about pirates who buried treasure under that very pier until the boy falls asleep smiling. And still, somehow, the numbers climb. Clients start saying yes more often. Jay Twistle watches Chris with something like awe. One afternoon, Chris shortens a call by 30 crucial seconds and uses the time to deliver documents across town on foot, saving the company money. The managers notice. The tide is turning, but so slowly it almost hurts more than the failing did. Rest now, darling. Let your whole body sink another inch into the mattress. Feel how the rain has become the gentlest hush, like the world itself is breathing with you, in and out. We're almost at the moment when everything changes, but not quite yet. Let the ache and the hope both settle deep inside your bones like warm stones. I'm right here, and Chris is still running, still carrying his son through the dark on feet that refuse to stop. The final week of the internship arrived like the last mile of a marathon run on broken glass. Chris's suit now hangs on him the way old curtains hang in an empty house, the jacket loose at the shoulders, the pants held up by a belt pulled to its very last hole. His eyes are ringed with purple so deep they look bruised, yet when he smiles at Christopher each morning, the light in them is brighter than the San Francisco sun trying to push through the fog. He has not slept more than 3 hours in a row for 6 months. His voice on the phone has become velvet over gravel, a sound that makes even the most impatient clients pause and listen. The other interns have started watching him the way sailors watch a man who refuses to drown. On the penultimate day, the managers call all 20 interns into the conference room that smells of lemon polish and fear. They post the final rankings on a single sheet of paper taped to the wall. Chris stands at the back with his arms folded tight so no one will see his hands shake. His name is second from the top. Second. One spot away from everything. The room erupts in nervous chatter, but Chris hears nothing except the blood roaring in his ears like distant surf. He walks out into the hallway, leans his forehead against the cool glass window that overlooks the city, and for the first time in half a year he lets himself imagine failure. He pictures Christopher's face if Daddy's job disappears again, pictures the shelters and the train seats and the bathroom floors stretching out forever. The glass fogs under his breath. He wipes it clear with the sleeve of his too big jacket and whispers to his own reflection, "One more day. Just one more." That night, the shelter loses their reservation because someone wrote the wrong date on the sheet. Chris stands in the rain with Christopher asleep on his shoulder, water dripping off both of them, and feels the familiar panic rise like bile. Instead of despair, he feels something fiercer, refusal. He walks them to the Glide Memorial Church, where a woman named Reverend Cecil Williams has opened the basement for overflow families. The basement smells of soup and candle wax and hundreds of quiet prayers. There are no cots left, only the carpeted floor. But it is warm and dry and safe. Chris lays their jackets down like a nest, curls his body around his son the way a comma curls around the rest of the sentence, and falls asleep still wearing his wet shoes so he can run faster in the morning. Friday. The last day. Chris wakes before dawn, kisses the soft place behind Christopher's ear that still smells like little boy even after everything, and leaves him sleeping wrapped in both jackets. He takes the first BART train into the city stands the entire way because sitting would crease his pants, and arrives at Dean Witter before the janitors. He makes coffee for the early managers, arranges the newspapers neatly, wipes fingerprints from the glass doors with the cuff of his shirt. When the floor officially opens at 8, he is already on his 112th call, voice calm, warm, unstoppable. He closes 3 accounts before lunch, more than anyone else has ever closed on the final day. His fingers fly over the phone buttons like a pianist finishing a concerto he has practiced in bomb shelters and bathrooms and on beaches under piers. At 4:57 p.m., the head of the program, Mr. Ribbon, walks past Chris's tiny desk and pauses. Chris is mid-sentence with a client in Ohio, explaining bond yields with the gentle patience of a man who has nothing left to lose and therefore nothing left to hide. Ribbon watches him for a long moment, then moves on without a word. Chris hangs up at 5 o'clock sharp, the exact second the internship ends, and realizes his hands are trembling so violently he cannot close the client file. The trading floor empties. Phones stop ringing. The silence is enormous. Jay Twistle appears in the aisle, face unreadable. "Chris! Conference room! Now!" Chris stands. His knees almost betray him. He walks the long hallway feeling every eye that isn't looking at him, hearing every heartbeat that isn't his own. The conference room door is closed. Jay opens it and steps aside. Inside, all the senior managers are seated around the table like judges at the end of the world. The air smells of leather and expensive cologne and the metallic edge of destiny. Ribbon gestures to the single empty chair. Chris sits. His tie is suddenly too tight. He resists the urge to loosen it because that would look like surrender. Ribbon leans forward. "Chris!" he says, and pauses so long Chris can hear the clock on the wall counting his life away. "We've been watching you for 6 months." Another pause. Chris feels the tears already gathering at the back of his throat, ready to spill whether the news is good or bad. Ribbon's mouth twitches. The tiniest beginning of a smile. You're not like the others. You don't have the degrees, you don't have the connections, you don't even have a place to sleep half the time. Chris feels the first tear escape and roll down his cheek. He does not wipe it away. Ribbon's voice softens completely. "But you have something none of them have. You have heart the size of this whole damn city. The job is yours, Chris. You're hired." The room explodes into applause, but Chris hears none of it. He is crying openly now, shoulders shaking, hands covering his face, because the relief is too enormous to fit inside a body. Jay Twistle claps him on the back so hard he almost falls forward. Someone presses a box of tissues into his hand. Someone else opens champagne, but Chris is already moving. He has to get to his son. He runs. Out of the building, down the steps 2 at a time, across streets where cars honk and brakes screech, but he doesn't stop. The daycare closed an hour ago. He knows the woman will have kept Christopher anyway because she has started to love the little boy who salutes every morning. He reaches the gate breathless, chest heaving, tears still wet on his cheeks. The woman opens the door, holding Christopher's hand. The boy's eyes go wide when he sees his father's face. Chris drops to his knees right there on the concrete, arms open, and Christopher runs into them so hard they both tumble backward. Chris holds him so tightly the boy squeaks, then laughs, then feels the shaking in his father's chest and grows quiet. "Daddy?" he whispers. Chris pulls back just enough to look into those huge brown eyes that have never once stopped believing. "We did it, little man," he says, voice cracking like sunrise. "Daddy got the job. We're gonna be okay. We're gonna have a home." Christopher's face lights up the way the city lights up. when the fog finally lifts. He throws his arms around Chris's neck and holds on as if he will never let go, and Chris holds him back the same way, both of them crying and laughing in the fading daylight, while the woman locks the gate behind them with tears in her own eyes. They walk home slowly this time. No running, Christopher riding on his father's shoulders, tiny hands tangled in Chris's hair. The city smells different tonight. Garlic and ocean and possibility. Chris stops at a payphone and calls the Mildred Hotel to secure the room for another month, then uses his very last quarter to buy Christopher an ice cream cone that drips chocolate onto both their shirts, and neither of them cares. They sit on a bench watching the sun sink into the bay, painting everything gold. And Chris realizes this is the first moment in a year he is not calculating how many minutes until the next disaster. There is only this. His son's sticky fingers in his. The taste of chocolate on the air. The sound of seagulls overhead like applause that will never end. Trivia Whisper. The real Chris Gardner was told the news in exactly that conference room. And he cried so hard the managers cried with him. And years later, when he became a millionaire and started his own firm, he kept a tiny plastic dinosaur from Christopher's backpack on his desk every single day to remember the nights under the pier. Have you ever felt a moment so perfect that time stopped just to let you live inside it forever? Let that moment be now, darling. Let Chris's tears and Christopher's laughter and the taste of cheap ice cream on a San Francisco evening settle over you like the softest blanket ever woven. Breathe it in, hold it, and let it carry you gently, gently towards sleep. The sky has turned that deep velvet blue that only appears after the longest day has finally decided to let you go. Chris and Christopher walk the last few blocks to the little hotel room that now feels like a palace, because the key actually works, and no one will ask them to leave in the morning. The street lights make soft golden pools on the sidewalk, and every time they step through one, Christopher lifts his face to the light like a flower opening. Chris feels the small legs tighten around his neck, feels the sticky chocolate fingerprints on his collar, and realizes his cheeks hurt from smiling, really smiling. For the first time in so long, he had almost forgotten how the muscles worked. The city hums around them, cable cars clanging in the distance, laughter spilling from open windows, the faint smell of someone's dinner garlic and rosemary drifting down like a promise that ordinary life is still possible. They climb the narrow stairs slowly, savoring each creaky step, because tomorrow they will climb them again, and the day after that, and the day after that, without fear. Inside the room, Chris sets Christopher down on the lower bunk, and kneels to untie the little shoes that have walked through hell beside him. He lines them up neatly beside the bed the way he used to line up toy soldiers when he was 5. A tiny ritual that says, "We are home now." Christopher watches with enormous eyes. "Daddy, are we rich now?" Chris laughs, a sound so free it surprises both of them. "Not yet, Captain, but we're going to be okay." More than okay. He lifts the boy into a clean t-shirt that actually fits, bought with the very first advance check, and tucks him under the thin but clean blanket that smells only of laundry soap and hope. Christopher falls asleep mid-sentence while asking if they could have a dog someday, his lashes dark against cheeks that are finally filling out again. Chris sits on the edge of the bunk for a long time, just listening to the quiet, steady breathing that has been his compass through every storm. He reaches out and smooths one curl away from the small forehead, feeling the warmth of the skin, the impossible softness. Tears come again, but they are different now. They taste like gratitude instead of terror. He whispers into the dark, "Thank you for choosing me to be your dad." And the words feel bigger than the room, bigger than the city, bigger than every hardship that tried to break them. Later, when the moon has climbed high enough to paint silver across the floorboards, Chris stands at the window looking out over the rooftops of San Francisco. The fog is rolling in the way it always does, soft and slow, covering the scars of the day. He thinks about the real Christopher, now grown, who still calls him every single Sunday no matter where in the world he is. He thinks about the millions of dollars that will come, the private jets, and the magazine covers, and the foundation he will build for children who sleep in bathrooms. But none of it feels as rich as this moment. A locked door, a sleeping child, and the quiet certainty that tomorrow will be gentle. Trivia whisper, so soft you can barely hear it over the rain. The real Chris Gardner kept that bone density scanner in his office for decades as a reminder, and every year on the anniversary of being hired, he buys ice cream cones for strangers on the street where he once sat crying with his son. Another tiny truth. When Jaden Smith filmed the final hugging scene, he didn't know Will had real tears. He thought it was just acting until his dad's shoulders shook so hard he got scared and hugged tighter, which is why the camera lingers so long on that embrace. It wasn't acting at all. Have you ever noticed how the hardest nights make the quiet ones feel almost holy? Let that holiness settle over you now, darling. Let the sound of Christopher's sleepy breathing become the sound of your own breath, slow and even and safe. Let the fog outside your window tonight be the same fog that wrapped itself around a father and son in 1981 and whispered, "It's over. You made it. You're allowed to rest." Feel your arms growing heavier, your legs sinking deeper into the mattress, your thoughts softening like candle wax at the edges. Every scene we walked through together is folding itself gently into the corners of your heart, becoming a small, warm light you can carry forever. Chris's tears, Christopher's laughter, the taste of chocolate ice cream on a summer evening that finally belonged to them. All of it is yours now, a lullaby made of resilience and love. One last slow breath with me, in and out. Let everything else drift away on the quiet rain. You are held. You are safe. You are loved beyond measure, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. And somewhere in the velvet dark, a little boy is dreaming of dogs and tree houses, and his father is standing guard at the window, smiling at the moon because happiness turned out to be real after all. Sleep now, my sweet friend. Sleep deeply and sweetly. I'll stay right here until morning, whispering soft good nights into your dreams, turning the page one last time on a story that ends with two hearts beating under the same safe roof, and the gentle, certain knowledge that tomorrow will be kind. Good night, good night, good night.